Okay, I'm saving the worst for first. I went through things that we had that probably were going to end up in the dump and came across this, and I thought this would be a good thing for a back bar. This is a cabinet from 1895. Yeah, that's over 120 years old, and it came out of a house in Milwaukee. It was a kitchen cabinet. It was built in, and it's got a little history to it. First of all, it was painted in ecru color originally, and then someone in the 1920s painted it yellow, and then after that, someone painted it mint green in the 1950s, and then after that, it was ripped out and sat in the basement, and it sat there till the 1970s. And then it was brought here by my mom, and she made it into a toy cabinet, and she didn't do any wood preparation or anything like that. It already had 3 coats of paint on it, and she put it and made it a green and red circus colors, and you can see the red has gotten right into the wood. Now when I stripped this, I was hoping it was going to be a really nice oak, but it turns out to be just a kind of a pine that's just was the cheapest wood to use for kitchen cabinets. And what I did was I just used a stripper, like an orange type stripper with the citrus smell. And the way you do it is you just you paint it on, and then you take some saran wrap, any kind of cheap plastic wrap, and you cover it up. And I did a section at a time, like I do the whole top first here, and then I cover it all in saran wrap, and I let it sit for about 5 hours. Sometimes I let it sit overnight, and then you pull the saran wrap off, and you can get the paint off pretty good with a scraper. Some spots it took me a little more, and you can see there's still paint in here. The green paint sunk right through the other paints and ended up right in the wood. And then when I was done with that, I used this sander and just gave it a good sanding. Now you don't need to see me doing all that because that's pretty straightforward. That was the most work, just prepping it. Now the inside is still painted mint green, and I'm just going to leave it mint green and paint over it. Now the mice were in it. The mice were nesting in it, and I took off the bottom and I took off the back because they were pretty much ruined with mouse urine. Yuck. And then this piece here is coming out next, and you're going to see us put a new piece in because you can see all the white on there is mouse urine. So I didn't even bother stripping that. Just going to leave it. We're going to replace that piece. We're going to put on a new back, and we're going to put on a new bottom to it. And I have the shelves also that I had stripped, and then we took a belt sander and sanded them down, and they're in this just raw wood, and I'm going to use some scrap carpeting in it. So the next step is taking off this piece and putting in a brand new piece of wood. Okay, here's our old kitchen cabinet again, and I just wanted to show you that my mom used some kind of lacquer paint, and the red and the green soaked right through the other 3 layers of latex paint that were on there, and it stained the wood. But this doesn't matter because I'm going to be covering it up, and I was thinking like what kind of color would be good, and I decided kind of a lava rock. Not quite black, but very black. Charcoal, maybe deepest charcoal you could find before you're into the pure black. And then I got some really cool Tiki fabric that I bought, and I'm going to show you that. And I'm going to be decoupaging the fabric onto this surface here and the middle. And it's got a yellowish background, so it's going to look really good with black. So let me get that out and show that to you. And I forgot to mention one other thing. If you're going to paint on raw wood, you want to get a good primer. This is a latex primer. Doesn't matter what brand you get, as long as it's some recognized brand that you know is a good brand. And first you want to put the primer on before you put the paint on. That's very important when you're working with raw wood. So first the primer is going to go on. Now down here I don't need the primer because I've left the old paint on from the 1950s. But when you get to the front part and the top, then it's going to get a coat of primer first. And I just thought I'd mention that. That's the color I'm going to paint it. It's kind of a dark charcoal. And then I found this awesome fabric. Look at this. Look at this. This is just great. It's got that mid-century look. And it's got all the Tiki motifs on it. And this is what's going to be decoupaged onto the doors. And maybe even if I have a little left over, onto the drawers. But first things first, I have to remove, like I said, I have to remove this bottom mouse urinated board, and then we're going to be cutting a new board out of pine and putting that in. And once that's done, I'm going to start painting the inside, and after the whole inside is painted, then we're going to get a bottom shelf and a back on this old baby. So that's the next step. Okay, I'm just using a brush for this little part. Just one of these brushes. And I'm putting this on thin because I'm going to be putting on more than one coat of it. So I'm doing a thin coat of this color. It's looking purple right now, but under the fluorescent light. And it's going to dry to that lava rock color. So I just want to go with a thin coat, and I did not have a narrow enough foam brush. So when I get to the other part, I'm going to just use a foam brush. But for this part, let's do it with this old brush. Get it real smooth. And you're seeing the streaks showing through because the primer was white. And the reason I used white primer, I could have bought two types of primer, but I just bought the white. So I had it here. I have to use white primer for the fabric because the fabric is yellow, has a yellow background, and if you have fabric that you're going to be putting onto wood, you have to go with the background color of the fabric. So if you have a dark brown background on your fabric, you'll want to go with a dark color for primer. If you have a light color or any bright or clear color on your fabric, then you want to go with white primer. I suppose they could even tint your primer. I'm not sure if they tint primer or not. But if you use a dark primer and then you'd put the fabric on, the fabric is going to look muddy. The color, it's going to darken the color of your fabric and make it look kind of dirty and muddy looking. So we want to keep it nice and clean, crisp looking. And that's why I did the white primer. Well, I just didn't like the way the brush or the foam brush, both the regular brush and the foam brush were looking. So I got out my little roller, and this is doing a lot better job of getting it on smooth. Now, I think the trick to anything with painting wood and you know, I'm no expert on painting wood, but just to do very light layers and build it up slowly. Don't try to goop it on and, you know, it's not covering exactly. You can see the white in places through it, but don't get like impatient. Don't get impatient and start gooping on more paint and making it really thick, because it's just going to look like crap. So what I'm doing is very light layer here. I'm seeing a little bit of the white through. That's okay. You just want to get it smooth and very thin and have no gobs of it anywhere. And you can always build up more coats. So here's what I have so far. And I take a good look at it and make sure there's no ridges. There's no drips going down the edge. And I'm just gonna leave it at that and let it dry. And when that's done, I'll give it another coat. Now let it cure. I know they say just like, oh, you can repaint the second coat after 3 or 4 hours. Well, I'm just gonna let it cure for a couple days. I like to let it cure when I paint anything. Rooms, whatever. I don't want to paint right over it too fast. Now over here where I did it with the brush, I'm not thrilled with the way it looks. It's got the streaks in it, although I tried to get it smooth as possible, but that's going to be getting a second coat and hopefully it'll look good then. I did the drawers over here, the drawer fronts. I decided just to paint them and not be putting fabric on. I can't really get in that middle section. You can see how the streaks are there from the brush, but on the flat parts I went over it with the roller. And so I think the way to go, if you're painting anything on wood, is to get one of these tiny little rollers. This is a real little one, and use that. Okay, so that's a lot better than trying to do it with the brush. So we'll get the rest of this painted up and let it dry, and then we'll be ready for the second coat in a couple days.